Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of myNewsWrap. News from the SAP world, from the Microsoft world, and from the area in between. So this week there will be a lot of news about combining SAP and Microsoft and of course SAP Embrace as a bit of a teaser. So let's get started. Let's dive into the topics. So first of all, there is one big news that came out yesterday that SAP has again acquired another company. This time it's from the area of no-code development, and the company that they acquired is called AppGyver, motivated by the famous MacGyver, I guess. I didn't know that company. This acquisition kind of, from my perspective, underlines the notion of SAP that was announced during TechEd, especially last year, that they want to get more grip in the area of low-code and no-code development. However, I'm a bit surprised that they acquired another solution in the area, because they last year during TechEd they kind of focused on SAP Room as the solution for the low-code development. Now they acquire something, so well, now the things have to play together, and I think the backlog of making the developer experience in that area seamless has another item on its list. But nothing new, because they have to do it for Signavio also. That was announced last week, this acquisition. So I think integration will be quite a hot topic this year at SAP. Now, one thing that's interesting about AppGyver, because I didn't know that company, I went to the homepage, and I especially also went to the pricing section. And what's really interesting is their pricing policies, if you want to call it like that, because for independent developers and organizations that have a revenue or a founding that's less than 10 million US dollars, the Composer Pro, so the tool, is free for life. So they are targeting the bigger enterprises in order to bring in the money, and they want to enable the smaller and very small developers to use their tools. That's really interesting, because that's something that's definitely not the case when you look at SAP tools. So let's see how this evolves, if SAP will jump on the train, or if this little section of the homepage that I'm currently showing in the video, where this free for life is depicted, will vanish forever. Definitely an interesting point to take a look at. Then, after the acquisition, I hope that's not a topic every week, let's switch to SAP Embrace, because the announcement of the extended collaboration between SAP and Microsoft is pushed more and more. So there is one new blog post by the CEO of SAP, Christian Klein, who wrote down his thoughts about the collaboration and how this will simplify business collaboration. So by bringing together the tools, well, what became clear, I think, at Rise with SAP when Christian Klein had his keynote was that he's very, very focused on the area of bringing teams into SAP products, and that's also reflected by this blog post. I think that's not the only area where Microsoft can bring in value, but Christian is very, very focused on that area. Now, if you remember the announcements that came with the extended partnership, the extended collaboration between SAP and Microsoft, there was the announcement that Teams will also be integrated into SAP Sales Cloud, and there is now a video available within the channel of SAP Customer Experience that makes the story a bit more tangible and shows the user journey quite well. It's all about bringing together the Teams meeting experience with the information that's available in Sales Cloud. So roughly speaking, the story is that the sales agent schedules a Teams meeting with the customer. Then this Teams meeting is tracked within the upcoming activities within SAP Sales Cloud. The meeting is executed. And within the meeting, you have within Teams all the information available, or focused information available from Sales Cloud on the customer, on what happened before. And you take some minutes during the call and you record the call. And this is then played back to SAP Sales Cloud without any further action that the sales agent has to do. So it's automatically integrated or played back. So that's really interesting. That gives a nice idea how SAP wants to move forward on specific user journeys, on how they want to integrate things. It's a bit a different story than what we saw last week when we took a look at the by design integration. But I think it's a valid journey from my perspective. And if you want to hear something about the extended partnership from the Microsoft part of the house, then I would recommend that you watch the SAP and Azure video podcast episode 27 from last week, which was purely focusing on this partnership, a really deep dive with Veronica Rega, who is responsible for this partnership from the Microsoft part of the house. And yeah, if you're around that area, if you're working with SAP and Microsoft and the integration, then this 45 minutes of this video podcast are well spent time from my perspective. Now, let's go to the SAP technology area. There are not too many news that crossed my path this week. So there is one new podcast by Christian Michel, Close the Gap, called Wir bauen einen Workflow von den DSAG Technologietagen. So kind of an aftermath of the DSAG Technology Days, where he talks about Stefan Schluchter, about the topic of workflow and what's important within the workflow, like business rules, like process visibility, like auditability, and so on. Of course, also integration is a topic because workflow is part of the integration suite, if I'm not mistaken. Then, there's not more from the business technology platform this week. So let's switch to the cloud application programming model. There is one news. Obviously, the open source contributions to the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model are getting more and more. This week, Gregor Wolf brought out an NPM package that brings the Azure Active Directory or Azure Active Directory B2C authentication to SAP Cloud Application Programming Model. So this NPM package supports you in dealing with this authentication type when using a Cloud Application Programming Model. It's quite interesting to see that the open source community is really pushing forward. There are a lot of topics and making this SAP Cloud Application Programming Model more usable in the world. So that's really highly appreciated. Now, as I said this week, I have no news about Kima. I have no news about Steampunk. It's a little bit quiet in that area. Let's see how things evolve there. So let's switch to the Microsoft side of the house. And there was one big announcement from my perspective of Microsoft. Well, there was one announcement that's more interesting for business people, that they now partner with Volkswagen with respect to autonomous driving. That was quite interesting. But from the perspective of SAP and Microsoft, the announcement that Microsoft unveils a new employee experience platform called Microsoft Viva was much more interesting from my perspective. This Viva is, again, interconnected with Teams. So it builds, from my understanding, on top of Teams and has several components. that should make your life easier as an employee. So it's all about empowering employees. It's helping the managers to not to make the employees more productive or more efficient in the sense of, and I intentionally use that term now, master and a slave, like it's unfortunately seen in a lot of companies still. It's really about helping people not to burn out, especially in remote working, where work and life balance kind of get a bit fuzzy. And there is one area that's also very important, and that's the learning area. Now, of course, learning per se is very important, but this is obviously the part that will get integrated into SAP SuccessFactors, because that's explicitly mentioned here. And if you remember the announcement of the SAP and Microsoft collaboration, SAP SuccessFactors was one part where teams should be integrated. And now it's clear, I think it's clear in which area this gets integrated. It's in the learning area, and it's Viva Learning. So yeah, kind of all around SAP Embrace this week. Now, unfortunately, this week I have no news from the serverless area. I don't know what happened. Either my Twitter stream is now kind of messed up, but I didn't see anything worth to mention from the serverless area. Hope I have some news next week. But I have some, let's say, general news around the area of Azure. There is one quite cool blog post by Thomas Maurer from Microsoft, who targets on how to save money on Azure using Azure reservations. Now, as you know, you usually, when you start with Azure, you go consumption-based, you go pay-as-you-go, or pay-as-you-use. And this is okay for exploration. This is okay for when you don't know which workloads are hitting your application. But at some point in time, and that's very nicely depicted in the blog post, you have some predicted usage within your systems. And in order to save money, you should go to reservations, where you pay less, but you kind of buy in that you use, I don't know, a Cosmos DB for a year with this and this parameters, or for 3 years with this and those parameters. So that's really something that's worth a look at, because I think that's often forgotten in projects. So you start in on an exploratory manner, and then at some point in time, you should learn how your app is used. And then you have some bottom line where you can predict the capacity that you need. And this really saves you money and helps you with the cloud qualities. Then this week also there was a nice new video from the Cloud Native Club about Kubernetes policies, or to be more precise, Azure policies that are then transferred to AKS, to Kubernetes, which was very interesting, a very, very deep dive on all the topics like Gatekeeper and Open Policy Agent, and those things, and the constraints that you can put into your cluster in order to make things work in a more governed way. So very, very interesting and a very deep dive. So it's really not, I think, not suitable for beginners in the Kubernetes area, but very important information from my perspective. And then there was another blog post that kind of falls into the area of Kubernetes, with about Dapper and Kida, that I used, or how those components are used in production, and wrote a short blog post on how they use those things and how they benefit from using the Dapper sidecar library approach, and Kida as an horizontal pod autoscaler in the Kubernetes cluster. So yeah, if you're in that area, very interesting read. Definitely worth it. Now, let's go to the area of SAP and Microsoft. And I have quite some news from there. People were really busy bringing things together. So there was one blog post by SAP on how to use Microsoft Graph API with the OAuth authorization via a Node.js app within a multi-target application. So bringing really together the MTA world with the Microsoft Graph world. It's a very elaborate blog post all around the bringing those things together, adjusting the access app.json, the access security.json, and the YAML file, and integrating the OAuth authorization into the Node.js app. So definitely helpful, more than helpful, and an essential ingredient. Then there was another blog post by Carl Rogan on how to call on an SAP Business Technology Platform application via a Microsoft Azure Logic app. And it's a timer-based app, so it's just a recurring task that should be called, that should call something within the SAP Business Technology Platform. And this blog post shows you how to create the app on the SAP Business Technology Platform, on how to create the Logic app, how to configure the OAuth handling, once again, this time from Azure to the Business Technology Platform, and how to make things run. Again, nice blog by Carlos. I like the style he writes blogs. Really read the blog and take a look at also the naming that he uses, because it's kind of makes me smile, makes my day. Then, another blog post about bringing together SAP and Microsoft, this time on the level of big data integration. And I think that's something that we will also see more and more. And that's about integrating Azure Data Lake and SAP HANA via the SDI adapter. And this blog post by Warren Dan goes over the steps necessary in order to bring these two worlds together. I think that really makes sense, and bringing in the data lake area in the topic of big data is really something that we definitely will see more and more. Okay, then one last block from the area of SAP and Microsoft bringing things together. Last but definitely not least, from my personally most favorite author about that topic, Martin Pangratz, who created the blog post that's more going into the area of, let's say, infrastructure, operations thingies. So it's about a Power App that simply snoozes SAP systems. So simply snooze it is a easy word. So it's not that easy if you take a look at the blog post, and there's really quite some things to do. And as usual, it's all described within this blog post. And there is also a big section on how to make things even more production ready. As usual, high quality content. And I think a nice example on how the Power Platform can also help operations in order to make their life easier. So cool contribution. Then let's go to the area of, let's say, learning, education, and events. There was a really nice blog post by SAP Press this week about ways to learn SAP. There are 35 plus ways to learn SAP, which shows that there are a lot of sources, but they're not really consolidated, which is not that cool from my perspective. But with this blog post, you get, at least if you start to dive into the SAP area, an impression of where you can go. Of course, there is SAP Press mentioned, no surprise on that. But there are also quite some other nice resources about learning SAP, about finding information, about finding help, and the communities in there that are really, really helpful. So that's why I mentioned it here. Then, as I mentioned, I think 2 weeks ago, Microsoft Ignite is coming at the beginning of March, and registration is open now. It's free, it's fully virtual, so I would highly recommend to register. Now I have two more topics for this week. Number one, on the area of developer productivity. I don't know if I just missed that or if that's new, but anyway, I want to share it. And that's GitHub 1S. So if you have a GitHub repository, I think it must be a public repository, and you add a 1S to the URL, a fully fledged Visual Studio Code pops up. So for those of you who are watching the video, I will show that now. I have here my repository, GitHub repository within my account. And if I add GitHub 1S to the URL, leave all the rest the same, the Visual Studio Code pops up, and it's there. So you can use it. You have the Git extension, and you can work with it. So that's really super cool. I was absolutely wow by this functionality. Yeah, take a look at it. And well, as a little side remark, in your face business application studio from my perspective, because that's really cool. That's really enabling developers. And that, as you saw, if you watched the video, the time of starting up on a given repository is really fast. So quite nice. Yeah, and one last thing that I think also is something that we have to deal with, and that's having more and more remote meetings. And there is one excellent blog post about building a healthier meeting culture by Microsoft, with a little checklist with 7 strategies on how to deal with meetings and how to make them healthier for you and for the people that join the meeting. So definitely something worth to read in the time that we are living currently. Okay, so yeah, that's it already. I think a lot of news from the area of SAP Embrace, and a lot of use cases on how really those two worlds can work together and add value for the customer. So really cool stuff that has been posted this week on the SAP community, but not only that. Hope you enjoyed the session. Hope I had some news in the pocket for you. So yeah, wish you a nice Friday, wish you a nice weekend, and see you next week. Till then, bye.